Hi everyone, I'm Michelle and welcome back to my meadow. For this video, I have gone through all of the recent questions you've asked in the last few months across all of the different Birdies versus Vego videos that I have published here on YouTube. I have made a list, and like Santa, I've checked it twice, and we're going to answer these questions today. If you are new to the channel, welcome. I am in Zone 9A in Northeast Florida. And if you've been with us a while, I'm glad to have you back. In 2021 in December, I purchased both a Birdies and a Vego raised garden bed. For orientation, the Birdies is on the left and the Vego is on the right. I wanted some raised garden beds that I felt would be durable, but I didn't know which brand I would like. So my wife suggested ordering both of them, create some videos, and here we are. Almost a year later, I have been creating videos comparing the Birdies to the Vego raised garden bed, and I've done these monthly updates at the request of the viewers. If you like this content, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you'd like to know more about what we're doing here in our garden in Northeast Florida. If this is the first time you've watched one of these review videos, this will be part of a playlist, and you can go back to the very beginning and see how I assembled the beds and the progress we've made along the way. I'm not going to cover all of those details today except to tell you the Birdies is the tall 8-in-1 garden bed. The Vego is the extra tall 9-in-1 metal garden bed. And the reason I chose these sizes was because they were both comparable in size and price at the time that I made the purchase. And YouTubers are so observant, you may have noticed there's practically nothing currently growing in these beds. That's because I have one more big experiment coming up in March. So be sure to tune back to the channel to watch as I dig these beds out, check out what's happened underneath the soil, and do a little bit of repair. I've divided your questions into categories. You may be able to see that these are rectangular beds, but someone wants to know, are there other shapes available? That answer is yes, absolutely. And you can find that there are now different kinds of patterns and shapes for both the Vego bed and the Birdies bed. Further, even Birdies now has a new urban that has a rust look on the outside as the beds get a patina over time. With Vego, you can purchase additional accessories, and someone wants to know, can you use the Vego accessories on the Birdies bed? And the answer is, I don't know. I suspect it won't be exactly the same, and that has to do with the screw configuration, because as I have noticed on the website, it appears that their configuration works with the fact that in this configuration I have 4 screws across the top, whereas with the Birdies bed we have 3 screws across the top, and so it might not work out the same for that support unless you want to drill holes into your bed. That said, Birdies does have an add-on on the Epic Gardening website where you can add on the electrical conduit frames to it in order to make your own sort of trellising or cover system for the Birdies bed. At the time I originally purchased these beds, I was not an affiliate for either company, but after installing them and falling in love with them, I decided to become an affiliate for both because I believe they both have something to offer depending on what you're trying to accomplish in your garden. Now, what that means for you is when you use the links that I provide, I will receive a small commission, and it helps support my work here on the channel, but it doesn't cost you anything extra to do that. So thank you to all of you who have supported the channel by making those purchases, and it allows me to keep going making these videos. Another viewer wanted to know, could you take multiple kits together and make longer beds or bigger beds? And the answer is yes, you can indeed buy kits from Vego to expand their beds, or from Birdies you would need to buy multiple beds in order to combine them. I'll put a link here also to Flicker Hill Homestead, because they make these epically long Birdies garden beds in order to grow very long rows of food in their garden. I really love this next question. Can they be converted into self-watering or sub-irrigated planters? Well, I've not built a sub-irrigated planter. If you don't know what that is, I'll be sure to put something in the show notes to tell you a little bit more about that. But ultimately, it's where you have a water tank below and you grow the food above. My answer is probably, but you have to be willing to drill some holes in the panels, because you see, the panels are solid. You need to have a way for any water that exceeds the height to drain off, so that you do not overwater your plants. And so the answer is probably, but you've got to be willing to do a little bit of construction yourself. Next, we've had a few questions about the color of the beds. Because they are two different brands, can I tell a difference in the color? When you get up close, the color difference is absolutely negligible. Another viewer wanted to know what I thought about the rounding, that the Vego was a little more rounded on the corner than the Birdies bed. And frankly, I didn't even notice until somebody brought it up, because I wasn't really worried about whether the corners were a little more round. What I'm excited is that they're not sharp. Someone else wants to know, why are there 4 braces in the Vego bed, but only 2 braces in the Birdies bed? Well, the answer to that is really, really simple. Let me get in close here. This is the Birdies bed, and you can probably see 1 screw, 2 screws, 3 screws. So there is only 1 single center point on this bed, so it makes sense to only have 2 support rods or bracing rods inside this bed. Whereas on the Vego bed, in this current configuration, you can see that I have 1, 2, 3, 4 screws, and that's because the panels on the Vego are a little bit narrower, and in order to have a center point, if you think about this from a physics standpoint, it would make sense to put the supports at both places in the middle and not just on one or the other. I don't know if currently all the beds are shipping with plastic coating, but when I purchased mine, they did. And someone wanted to know why I didn't leave the plastic on the inside. I don't want plastic inside my bed. I do worry that over time that plastic will break down and then become microplastic down in my soil. So I did choose to remove those as recommended by the company. Now let's talk about size, because I've heard in garden beds, size matters. The Vego bed in the front here is 32 inches tall, and I chose something that tall because it allows me to garden waist high. I don't have to dig down on the ground looking for tiny little weeds. I can get right here up close and personal, right at waist level, and pluck any little new weeds that are coming up. And on this same topic, folks want to know, is it better for me with the 32 inches or the 30 inches? And frankly, because of how they're configured, I really don't notice the difference. All right, now let's get on with the worry, the things that you've been worrying about, and you asked me, am I worried about? Am I worried about toxicity from the metal leaching into the soil? I am not. Both brands use a USDA approved paint that is certified for food contact, so I'm not worried about that. Since I'm in Florida, do I worry about corrosion from the salt air? While I'm in Florida, I'm not that close to the beach, so no, that's not a worry for me, and nothing I'd really ever thought about here in Florida, though it is a great question. Another person wanted to know, how did the beds hold up during the hurricane? Absolutely fine. Now, where we were, we did not have ongoing winds. We only had gusts up to 50 or 60 miles an hour. But I saw no problem with the bed themselves. The things that were planted in the beds, well, they got wind whipped around, but they did all right too. But as far as the beds, they were not impacted by this hurricane. We didn't have a tornado. And if it was a really strong tornado or something, there's not really anything I could do anyway to make these beds more secure. So this one comes back to an assembly question, and it is a fair question. One person asked why I didn't wear better footwear when I was assembling the beds. You know, I am typically a safety person, and I normally think about things like that. It just never occurred to me that I might drop one of those panels on my toes. So yes, I did wear a lightweight sneaker while I was doing my assembly. This question's really good. Am I worried about a string trimmer dinging up or messing up the powder coating on the beds? And frankly, yes. I don't know if it would hold up to long-term use with putting a string trimmer up against it, which is why I put down the landscape fabric. Yes, I'm worried. No, I probably wouldn't put a string trimmer up against it. Yes, I would put some landscape fabric. I might even put landscape fabric down even at just the edge of the bed and border it with some mulch or something to try to help keep the grass away from the edges of the bed. Now let's talk about the conditions where these beds are located. Folks want to know, are the beds fading in the sun? No, I don't see any difference in the color on this side of the bed versus the back side of the bed where it doesn't have the same exposure. The next question is, are the screws rusting? No. I do not have any rust in the screws on the Vego. I do not have any rust on the screws on the Birdies. And as I understand it, it's possible that the Birdies have now gone to a stainless steel screw instead of a zinc one. Another viewer wanted to know, aren't they in too much shade? Well, not really. Frankly, I try to record these videos in the morning while it's still shady and cool outside and not in the hottest part of the day. A few of the videos I did do later in the day, and these are in full sun, and so the sun comes up over these trees, and about 10:30 or so, typically, especially during summer, the sun is full on over here, and they get plenty of sun every day in the summer, spring, winter, and fall. Someone else wanted to know, how do I keep the ants from taking over? Now, that is a garden question that I think is worth answering for anybody regardless. If you have ants in your garden bed, it's probably because it's too dry. Ants don't want to live in a wet and moist environment. So if you're getting a problem with ants in your bed, then you definitely want to check your watering patterns and make sure that you're getting your beds and your plants the right amount of water that they need. People want to know, will the beds hold up in, you can just pick a condition, freezing conditions, zone 4, sub 20, in Arizona heat. From everything I understand, these beds have been installed around the world in cold conditions and hot conditions. And I have never had anybody mention on the channel that there is a problem. In fact, a number of people say, hey, I'm in this place and they're doing fine. It did good in the freeze. Everything is fine. Now, let's talk about some of the other gardening things. You can see that I have a mulch on top of there. Those are pine flakes from Tractor Supply. People want to know if it's affecting the bed. No, it hasn't yet. They aren't fully a year old. I worked with those because they were easy for me to lift and move around. You don't have weed seed in them. And frankly, they do a really nice job creating a fluffy area on top of the bed. As they break down, will they make the soil more acidic? They might. And at that time, I'll deal with it. But for now, I'm really, really happy with what's growing on using the pine flakes. Someone else wants to know how I water the beds. I just currently use a hose. However, this year, I do plan to install these micro sprinkler irrigation kits and have the beds hooked up to drip irrigation. Now, this next question is rather subjective, but it is, what can you plant in beds that are so tall? anything you can plant in beds that aren't so tall. But it comes down to being able to harvest. So in beds like these, there's very few things I wouldn't plant. However, okra is one that I would more likely save for a lower bed because I had some varieties of okra last year that grew to over 12 feet tall. So I would have 15-foot tall okra plants if I did that. Some folks were worried about tomatoes, indeterminate tomatoes, and being able to harvest those. Well, here's what I did for my tomatoes, and while I didn't have a crazy amount on vines on this bed last year, here's what I did. Between these two beds, I installed a cattle panel, and on my tippy toes, I can reach the top. And so I simply planted my tomatoes in the ends so they could grow up and over the trellis. What soil did I use to fill these beds? Now you can watch the whole video from the playlist. I bought my organic soil from a local company and they brought it out by the truckload. So I used an organic mix that had compost and wood chips and other great things in it. Someone else wanted to know, would I plant asparagus in these beds? Considering that the soil does get lower as it breaks down over time when you fill the bottom of the bed. If I was planting asparagus though, I would probably be using a shorter version. They do make a 15-inch, I believe, at Vego, and a 15-inch at Birdie, and a 17-inch at Vego. So I would probably use a lower bed for asparagus because it's not something you're picking all the time. And I would most likely just fill that completely with soil so that I wouldn't have to worry about it sinking. I hope that helps. A number of folks want to have taller beds so that they can keep wild animals out of their beds. You guys have asked me about a lot of different creatures. Can they get in the bed? Did I protect it from the bottom to keep something from burrowing up into the bed? I did not. My soil here is really heavy and thick and clay, and I suspect that I don't really have a problem with animals digging up from the bottom. That said, I do know that the raccoons have popped in the bed and dug around a little bit. I haven't seen any squirrels in the bed. I have seen birds in the bed. The feral cats that live here in the meadow occasionally like to jump up there. And so I am continuing to work on ways to keep them out of the beds. But for those who asked about hedgehogs, I don't know. I've never seen a hedgehog in person. I don't know how it would get in the bed. Maybe it could climb a tree and jump off. I'm not sure. Same for iguanas. I don't know how long they get, but I think maybe an iguana is big enough that if it really wanted to, it could stand on its hind legs and pull itself up into the bed. But I don't know because I'm in Northeast Florida and we don't have iguanas here. So, that said, you can probably see here on the end of this bed, I have these little wrought iron fences. I am probably going to use that or something like that this year to create some fencing to discourage the animals from jumping up into the bed, because I can see while I have been letting the bed be dormant awaiting this next video after this one, something, probably Moose, if you guys watch the channel you know who Moose is. He's one of the garden cats here, or feral cats. They're not really all that feral anymore after 3 years, but someone's been making a bed there because I can see the indentation, but they're not digging around. They haven't been using it as a litter box. And ever since I started using the pine, I don't seem to have the problem with them digging in the bed quite as much either. So that makes me happy. I don't know if it's an effect of the pine or just it's not practical for them, but so far, so good. Now, let's talk about the things I've added on to the bed. We talked about the cattle panel just a little bit, but this is a 16-foot cattle panel. I got it from Tractor Supply. I literally folded it in half and slid it between the two beds. That's it. That's the entire installation. It's not screwed. It's strictly held in by the pressure of the bend of the beds back against there. Second, I put down landscape fabric because I didn't want to have to take the weed eater or whippersnipper up to the edge of the bed. Some people want to know what this is. This is a DeWitt fabric. I purchased it on Amazon, and I'm happy to put the link into the show notes or the description of the video. Now, finally, you've asked me a couple of opinions of mine, so I'm going to share those. What would I do differently? I'm happy with how I assembled them. Next time I'll wear better footwear. I would put my landscape fabric down first. I would make sure that, butterfly, I'm so easily distracted. I would make sure that my landscape fabric was down first. Second, when filling the beds, we were kind of in a hurry and we didn't really think about it at the time, but really we should have spent more time packing in the leaves and the mulch around the wood. I believe we left a lot of air pockets in there. So what did I miss? Do you still have other questions? Maybe you really want to know which bed I like the best. Well, in this current configuration, Birdies is larger. And so at the time I made the purchase, Birdies gave me more square foot of gardening space than Vego. Vego, on the other hand, is just a little bit taller. But for me, that doesn't really make a big difference, but it might for you. Overall, working with both companies as a customer and an affiliate, I've had no problems. I have found customer service to be really good. In fact, I've had conversations with people from both teams, and I've been really happy with the way that it has gone. In fact, I'm so happy, I am planning to get another Birdies bed and a Vego bed to do a head-to-head video for 2023, knowing what I know now. So do stay tuned to the channel for that. At the end of the video, I'm including the playlist that this video and all the other Vego versus Birdies videos are in. So be sure to check that out if you're curious about how things have gone along the way. Until next time, my friends, remember to wear that high quality sunscreen, drink plenty of water, and as always, have a fantastic day. One more thing that I would do differently is I would have moved that avocado tree before I put in the Birdies box. It does put a little shade. I thought that would be a good thing, but I found it's actually rather frustrating when I'm trying to move around on the beds down there. And so in the dormant season for that avocado tree, we'll be digging it up and moving it to another part of our yard.